Ooh! Have we got the
Patreon?
Yes! We've got a
Patreon! I value your impeccable service as ever, Storm Shadow. But do you mean to tell me my troopers are impossible to get store exclusives? The stripped-down infantry version won't be available until next year, and the only army builder you can buy at retail is short-packed! This is intolerable! In the 80s we knew how to launch a line! We had troopers aplenty, we even had officers, and all in the first wave! I'm surrounded by incompetent imbeciles!
That's it! I have had it with these snakes on this one!
Hello interwebs, it's Scott from Admiralty Entertainment, and today we're looking at the G.I. Joe classified series Cobra Commander from Hasbro. G.I. Joe is the original action figure, released in 1964 as a 12-inch doll for boys, but it was the reimagining of the concept in 1982 as a 3 3/4 inch scale line that created a plethora of characters and concepts that have been the core of the franchise since then, not the least of which is the primary antagonist, Cobra Commander. Created by comics legend Archie Goodwin and incorporated into the reworked Fury Force pitch from Larry Hama that would serve as the genetic stew of the real American hero concept, Cobra Commander would become the poster boy for the evil terrorist organization and one of the most iconic villains of the 1980s, in no small part due to the notable vocal performance of Christopher Collins, aka Chris Latta, in the original cartoon.
Then the little man inside, that makes me do bad things, will come.
This guy's gone. I'll never sit up front at a comedy show again.
The characters' in-universe origins have varied with the different incarnations of the franchise itself, encompassing everything from being a used car salesman whose brother killed Snake Eyes' family in a drink driving accident, a disfigured Cobra La scientist, the ultimate evolution of Action Force villain Baron Ironblood, a disfigured businessman, or a military scientist friend of Duke who is also the brother of the Baroness whom he mind controlled using dynamites that also used to eat the Eiffel Tower and turn Destro's actual head into metal. Yeah, not every version's a winner. The G.I. Joe Classified series was launched in 2020, finally moving the Joe brand into a 6-inch scale after years of rumours. This figure is from the second wave, which, ironically, was the first wave to hit New Zealand shelves, alongside Gung Ho and a foolishly short-packed army builder, Red Ninja. There's already 3 versions of this figure set for release in quick succession. The regular retail version here, the Regal variant that caused a buttload of confusion and anger when it was supposedly launched on the Network app but then turned out not to have been, and finally the Snake Supreme version that was likely intended to be a San Diego Comic-Con exclusive but was instead released as part of Hasbro PulseCon. The Regal variant of this figure skews more to a lighter cartoon blue with gold accents and accessories, and seems to be the default look in the G.I. Joe Operation Blackout game, which makes me wonder if that was supposed to be the regular release version. While the Snake Supreme goes for a black and red colour scheme with deluxe packaging and additional accessories, including a vintage toy-inspired sidearm similar to what they did with the Hasbro Pulse Snake Eyes. While each version has its appeal, I honestly prefer the colour scheme of this version, so I'm not unhappy to go with just the regular retail release. Looking at the packaging, it's a very slick and attractive box, but it does manage to both have information overload and a lack of any narrative substance. The top of the box is Cobra branded and has 06 as the figure number. It's not really clear why Hasbro number figures in some of their lines, but not others, but clearly they've decided to do so for the Classified series. Plus a bit of spill from the window through which the Commander and his accessories can be clearly seen against a nice Cobra logo on the inner tray. There's a G.I. Joe Classified series logo and a nameplate for CC at the bottom of the box, and an illustration of the Commander in the lower right, which, for some reason, matches the Regal version's colour scheme rather than the regular retail release, and this spills around the side of the box. That side has a different illustration of the Commander above the spillover, with some Rise of Cobra era Night Ravens flying behind him. The opposite side of the box has a Cobra symbol, small nameplate, and a bunch of graphical information not unlike the symbols seen on the Overwatch Ultimates boxes, so possibly they tie into the G.I. Joe Operation Blackout game, but they do actually act as data readouts, similar to Transformer tech specs. The packaging itself doesn't provide any definition as to exactly what these symbols are supposed to mean. You have to go to the official G.I. Joe website to get that information. But if you decide to define the symbols based on your own best guess, the symbols denote the Commander's rank, firepower, weather domination ability, and interest in marionettes, with the Cobra hood behind each of the symbols indicating the power level for each of those aspects. So CC is pretty decent in most aspects, except for his firepower, which seems to be just standard. I mean, it's a bit of a kick in the head for a guy whose secondary military speciality is ordnance, but it does kind of fit with the offerings for this particular figure. There's also a repeat of the 06 figure designation for those who like to store their figures bookshelf style. The back of the box eschews any biographical information in favour of an admittedly gorgeous illustration. While it's a great picture, excellently rendered and chock full of references to both this line and Joe toys of the past, I'm a little disappointed that there's no information about either this specific character or scenario to stoke the imagination the same way that file cards did on the original vintage figures. But I guess this is aimed at a target audience that either A, already knows who he is, or B, know how to use Siri. Overall, it's a very nice in-box presentation that catches the eye on shelves and looks great for those that want to keep it MIB. But I really do think it would be improved by the inclusion of a file card or cross-sell of some description, even if it weren't aping the old back-of-the-card style of the original figures. Out of the box, the figure comes with a set of extra hands, a knife, and a pistol. The pistol has a fascinating design, coming off quite flintlock-ish, rather than the high-tech or sci-fi pistol style of armament that the Commander has traditionally wielded. Along with more snakes built into it than a Samuel L. Jackson movie, so very much staying on brand there. The sculpt work is extremely impressive, from the mini bayonet at the front all the way through to the snakehead grip. But the choice to have it just a solid silver misses the chance to highlight some of the sculpting work with some other colours or paint washes. I suppose all the savings and not paying licensing fees went to the paint apps on the figure rather than the accessories. To me, this design feels perhaps a bit too ceremonial rather than functional. While this figure definitely comes across as more decorative than most Battle Helmet CCs, I really think this particular sidearm would fit better with the Snake Supreme release, while a less decorative weapon would fit better with the more everyday style here. Sadly, the figure has no holster to keep this sidearm at his side, though the Snake Supreme will apparently do so. There's also a snake-themed short sword, long knife, machete. The length is a little bit in between standard sizes for bladed weapons, and again there's some great sculpting present, particularly on the snakehead pommel, and the design is unique. Well, honestly, it looks a bit like a wannabe Klingon weapon.
The Klingon cruiser of far. Or do you intend to disobey Federation orders?
But given that the Commander isn't known for his fencing skills, it's okay that it looks more fanciful than functional. The gold of the pommel looks good, and thankfully there is a scabbard to keep it in, though that will tend to get in the way if you want him sitting down. The tails of his uniform jacket will probably cause you much the same level of difficulty in that regard. And when it's sheathed, there's still part of the blade that remains exposed, which looks odd. Whether you count them as accessories or part of the figure itself, we get 2 additional hands, bringing the grand total to 4 all up, all of which are unique. There's a clenched fist and clutching options for the left hand, with a trigger finger and pointing hands for the right. They swap out easily but are firm in the socket so won't fall out. They certainly add a lot of options to posing, and the lack of a matched pair in any configuration here doesn't feel like much of a drawback. Moving on to the figure itself, clearly a lot of design cues for this figure were taken from the classic battle helmet design, which, by my count, just pips the hooded look as the most frequently made design. But it's definitely an update rather than a remake. Like his accessories, this outfit tends more towards the ceremonial side than in the field, but it doesn't lean so heavily in that direction that it limits its use to only formal situations. There's lots of subtle callbacks, intentional or not, to outfits past, and the helmet has a couple of new design elements that, to me at least, heighten the snake-like aspects without being distracting. There's a ton of great detail in the sculpt, scaly textures, fabric folds, armoured segments, buttons, chains, stitching. They all look great and are a lot easier to appreciate on a 6-inch figure than on a 3 3/4 inch one. As you'd expect for a mass market offering, the majority of this figure is cast in the appropriate colour, and this works well. He's a good, deep cobra blue, and the black elements add to the menace, with sharp red and metallics adding eye-catching pops of colour that really do increase the visual interest. The collar sculpting does indicate a couple of missed opportunities for extra paint detailing, but otherwise it feels like everything that could be painted is, and it's done nicely with no notable slop or other major problems. In terms of articulation, it's largely the same as what we see in other Hasbro 6-inch lines. The head is on a ball joint, with a hinge at the neck but only a small amount of waggle. The shoulders have rotation and extension, along with a butterfly joint that allows for some additional crossbody but mostly significantly backwards movement, and the outfit does a nice job of leaving it mostly concealed from the front. The arms, however, are incapable of hanging naturally at his sides, which is disappointing, but there is a swivel at the top of the bicep, double hinged elbows, and rotation at the wrist, with hinges on all alternate hands, lateral on most, but tilting on the trigger finger hand. The ab crunch is very limited. There's some backward motion, which gets hindered a bit by the overlay, but very little forward crunch. The waist swivels, but is significantly hindered by the edges of the jacket, and the ball joint hips are also hindered by the outfit around them. He has drop-down hips, though I've had limited success in making that work for anything particularly useful. There's a swivel at the top of the thigh, double-jointed knees, there's a boot swivel, but bear in mind that there's a section cut out at the back to assist with the double joint at the knee, so rotating here will hinder that joint slightly, and hinged rocker ankles. So he hits most of these standard leg articulation points. In terms of scale, he's got plenty, because he's a snake. Anyway, Cobra Commander stands at 6.5 inches and he'll work with a fairly decent selection of other figures, even outside Hasbro's other 6-inch lines, which opens up a plethora of snake-based operative options.
They simply don't make terrorists like they used to.
He is of course too large to work with most previous G.I. Joe lines, unless you're going for some sort of Cobra Commander as a giant robot or monster cartoon-style concept. Overall, we're looking at a pretty solid figure here. I'm knocking off points for the ab crunch not being terribly useful, the limited usefulness of the butterfly hinged shoulders, and the inability to put his arms straight down at his sides in terms of limiting the functionality of the figure itself. Personally, I would have liked to see the accessories be a little less excessively weird. A holster for his sidearm, a scabbard that would comfortably fit the entire edged weapon, and a swappable masked head to make this the best it could possibly be. I also wouldn't say no if they'd chucked in the holy hand grenade of Antioch that the Snake Supreme version gets as well, so we could get more use out of that clutching hand. But ultimately, this is a basic release, rather than the ultimate be-all and end-all that it could have been. All quibbles aside, I really like the design here. The colour scheme works well and should look good with troopers. I've got to work on theory here. Damn you Target exclusives. Vipers or Crimson Guards, if/when they get made. Cobra Commander is an essential character, and I think this is a solid representation, but one that probably looks a little better than it plays. He's definitely well worthwhile, just perhaps not at the top tier of must get absolutely immediately, especially given that there's a pretty good chance there'll be more versions of him down the line in equally interesting outfits. So, those are our thoughts, what are yours? We're out of here for now.
Retreat! Retreat!
So be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time on Admiralty Entertainment.